blessings? Do we actually recognize what God has given us, provided for us, and planned out in our lives? Or are we always looking for something different, something better, quote unquote? And what about contentment? So we're looking today at Proverbs 5:15. We're going to look at Proverbs 5, a little bit larger piece than that, but 5:15 specifically. And so it comes down to this: what's the story? So Proverbs 5 is talking about sexual sin. So I don't know if that's what you planned on talking about in Sunday school today, but here we are, right? And so that's the kind of, it's talking about marriage and relationship, if you will, what's correct and what's not correct, and you know, so it starts out, my son, attend unto your wisdom and bow your ear to my understanding, that you mayest regard discretion, and thy lips may keep knowledge. For the lips of a strange woman drop as honeycomb, and her mouth is smoother than oil, but her end is bitter as wormwood, sharp as a two-edged sword. And so we start talking about these things, and we use some analogies, I guess, if you will, or some discussion of symbolism that may get confusing. But understand that the entirety of this is based on a warning against sexual sin. And there's a couple of things I think we can learn from this that are really important. So this marriage and relationship. And remember that we are the bride of Christ. Okay? And so marriage is something that when the Bible talks about marriage, it's pretty serious about it. And I would put to you that marriage, I was tempted to do that. Marriage is what brings us together today. Yeah, the whole thing. But I didn't. But marriage is God's idea. Man has all these rules that we want to throw out there. We just had an election here in California talking about whether or not it's okay to have marriage defined as between a man and a woman, or if, it needs to be broader than that. But marriage was God's idea. It seems to me like if we want to change the definition of marriage and that sort of thing, that we probably should go ask God about it. Does that seem reasonable? Let God have some input into that kind of decision, since it was his idea in the first place? And so that's the basis of this. When we get to verse 15, it says, drink waters out of thine own cistern, and running waters out of thine own well. And that's a simple little verse. It almost sounds like it needs a beginning and an end added to it. It's just kind of the middle. But we're going to take this apart, and we're going to look at it in a kind of reverse order of what it says, because I want to look at as the water flows, and then I want to try and make this relevant to the topic and relevant to our everyday life today. As the water flows. Water flows. If it doesn't, it gets stagnant. And all kinds of problems start to happen where water is stagnant. And so it says, and running waters out of thine own well. So let's start with the well. And this is a well, it's talking about like a pit, all right? But this is a well that it talks about waters running out of, meaning that it's bubbling up, it's has life coming forth in this well. Okay? That's where we get running waters. I don't remember where it was exactly. I was about 12 at the time, but we were on a tour with our singing group at the time. We went on a 6-week tour across mostly the Midwest, and we threw in some fun times as well. We were often apt to do. You got a bunch of teenagers and stuff. You got to kind of keep them entertained, right? So, and we went to a river and fished and did some stuff. But this river, I'll never forget, we went to where it started. And where it started was water that just bubbled up out of the ground. And they didn't know where the bottom of that well was. They had tried to find it. They didn't know where it was. It was really deep. But the water just flowed up and formed this river. So there was a little road that went across at the head of this thing. On the left-hand side was dirt, and on the right-hand side was a river. And I just, that mental picture I never have forgotten. And that's kind of what we're talking about here, a well where the water is springing up out of this well. And it says that the water is running out of the well, and then it says, drink waters out of thine own cistern. And a cistern is a place where you store your water. Okay, so a lot of times you see a cistern, there's different ways you can do this, but a lot of times you see a cistern where a well doesn't produce a lot of water. You may have a cistern to store the water up so that you have sufficient water for what you need, even though that you don't have a lot of volume of water. Now that's not the picture it puts here, but the cistern is this storage place that you can draw from. Does that make sense? Okay. So, how does this apply to this warning against sexual sin? Well, it's saying, when it talks about that you should drink waters out of your own cistern and running waters out of your own well, it's talking about you should have a relationship that is pure and right with your wife. Okay? Now, not a ton of notes on here. You can scribble all you want on this piece of paper. But I want to make sure we understand the point and get it in our brain. In relationships, in a marital relationship, you need to go to your own cistern. You need to go to your own well for that relationship. And the first thing about that, and this goes right with the marriage vows, is a commitment to that's where you're going to get those things. That's the source that you're going to go to is in that marital relationship. You're not looking outside of it. See, if you start looking other places, you will deceive yourself. You will fall. That's what will happen. But God provides for us through marriage, and you can say through monogamy, but through marriage, he provides for us those sexual things, but those relationship things that are proper and right. Yes? You should. You know, well, yeah. In a marriage relationship, communication is huge, right? And you need to be able to communicate. And see, here's the thing: over the years, doing counseling with couples regarding marital relationships, I can tell you, you would think that the number one biggest problem would be sexual relationships. And it's not. It's not. But it is an issue, and it's an issue primarily because of communication. And so there's certain things that happen in a marriage relationship like that. So, the common one, and I've said this before, but the common one is communication breaks down one way or the other. And so intimacy breaks down, whether it's because she says that's not happening, or whether it's because he becomes enamored with looking elsewhere for that part of the relationship or whatever. But that's where it starts breaking down. And it's communication based. I looked at a study one time. It said the top 3 causes of problems in marriage are loss of job, loss of parent, or kitchen remodel. Okay. But it gets the relationship where the communication isn't happening. And so what happens is instead of going to fix that, and that's kind of what you're talking about, but instead of going and fixing the relationship problem, the eye starts to wander, the mind starts to wander, and the whole situation starts to break down because we stop looking at our own well as the place we need to go. I need some water. I need to go to my own well. And I can have a cistern. I can have it stored up. I have a source. It's the one God's provided. It's the one I'm supposed to go to. It's where I'm supposed to be looking to. And we get busy looking elsewhere. It's funny. I laid out this series in general months ago, and we're winding our way through towards the end of it, but laid it out months ago, and I didn't really pay attention to what was going to be what or when, so to speak. Didn't care. I just knew I was going to do lessons 1 through blah blah blah, right? And so we're doing this lesson today, having just gotten back from vacation, and my wife and I were in Montana actually, and stayed in a hotel there for 2 weeks. And it's funny that this is the lesson I'm coming back to because, there's all kinds of things you think of when you think of a state like Montana and more small town kind of atmosphere and that sort of thing. But we had booked our hotel stay so that we spent 2 weeks in the same hotel, and I specifically asked them if they would book it so that I could stay in the same room the entire 2 weeks, because it's a pain to have to move everything. You kind of get set up in your room. And they agreed to that. They did that for me. And so everything was great. First week, all good. Second week, first part of the week, I was out hunting with my son, and I got a phone call from the hotel front desk. They said, we're really sorry, but we need to move you. Okay, that's not really all right. Why do you need to move? Well, I can't really say, but we shouldn't have put you there for the whole time because there's a private party coming in this weekend, and we need to have you out of there. And I said, is it because you have the room reserved for somebody? And they said, well, no, they have they booked the entire floor. And I said, well, isn't there some way I can stay there? And she said, you do not want to stay in that room. I said, well, what are you proposing? And she said, well, we can move you down a floor. And I said, and you said it's because of a private party. And she said, yes. And I said, well, okay, then is moving it down a floor, is that going to put the party on top of my head where it's going to be loud? And she said, no, it's not going to be loud. Okay. So what's the problem? She said, well, I can't say. It wouldn't be politically correct. I said, okay, ma'am, I'm a big boy. I can deal with real life. I'm assuming you're an adult and can speak plainly, and I'm not going to hold any of it against you, so why can't I stay in my room? And she said, because there's going to be a lot of nudity on that floor. I said, excuse me? She said, well, it's the whole floor is reserved for a swingers party. Okay, well, we'll be moving down a floor. So I'm looking at this, and by definition, that lifestyle doesn't look to its own well. It doesn't look to its own cistern. It looks somewhere else to try and find satisfaction. It's okay. You can say it. But the reality is, there's a lack of satisfaction. There's a lack of contentment that leads to that kind of a lifestyle. When you talk about relationships where cheating happens and different things like that go on, where the sexual side of the intimate marital relationship breaks down, you're talking about a lack of contentment. And lack of contentment comes when we don't value what we have. You can have a relationship that isn't perfect, but you can be content within it if you stop trying to compare it to something that doesn't even exist. That's where we get fouled up. We get fouled up when we start looking at woulda, coulda, shoulda. Right? Well, it should be this way, but it's not. Right? Well, it could be this way, but it's not. But I want it to be that way. Okay, but it's not. That's not reality. We live with all kinds of crazy, it's like, and I'm going to probably step on somebody's toes, and if I do, I apologize. But we get in these situations where we look at our past, our childhood, our previous, and they dictate how we live today. You say, you don't understand. I had a horrible childhood. All this stuff went wrong. I was abused this way or that way or whatever it was. I didn't have this or I had too much of that or whatever it is. And our life is all messed up. It's the reason I can't make good decisions. It's the reason I'm having this problem or that problem or whatever it might be. But here's the problem that you experience. We live in the now, and Pastor Steve has done a great job on a number of occasions talking about the God of the now and the right now, and this is now, and now is now, and that's the past because it's now, But what you're doing is you're taking something you cannot change and you're letting it influence your now. Right? So you take the past, which is, it is what it is. You can't make it be something it wasn't. It's over. And you're saying, because of what happened here, I can't be content now because this was bad. So what you've said is there's no hope whatsoever that I can ever get out of this rut that I'm in. Pastor Barbie said a rut was a ditch with two ends on it. A grave was a rut with two ends on it. That's what he said. You can't get out of the rut. Can't get out of the grave because I'm disappointed. Forgetting those things that were behind. Yeah, I let it go. It's dead and it stinks. Start today. And if that doesn't screw you up enough, then we have the reverse of that, which is the person that looks to the future and can't figure out how to make the future look the way they want it to look. And so they walk around discontented because their future doesn't look right. It's fine to strive for something you think is good and all that. There's nothing wrong with that. But you can't live there because it hasn't happened yet. People talk about what the future's going to look like and what it's going to hold. And I tell them, you're just one broken hip away from that ain't happening. Seriously. You can have the greatest plan in the whole world, and it can change like that. And that's very negative. It could change negatively just like that. But it's positive, too. It can change like that. You could be sitting there saying, it's hopeless, woe is me, I have nothing, I can't pay my bills, I don't have a job, I need a medical procedure I can't afford, so my health's in trouble, I'm all screwed up, nothing possibly could ever change this. Publishers Clearinghouse, yeah, but it could happen. It might not, but it could, right? You don't know. It's the future. There's only one person who knows the future. And he says he's got a plan for you, and it's for good, not for negative. So we go to this contentment. So in our relationships, in the intimate relationships, take what God has given you and value it. I wish my spouse was a better lover in this regard. You know what? Take what your spouse is and value that. Value what God has given you. You know, intimacy involves communication in all different forms, but it involves communication. If you want to have a better relationship with your spouse on any level, improve your communication. Learn how to talk to one another. Learn how to communicate with one another. You ever had a friend that was such a good friend you could finish each other's sentences? Do you have that relationship with your spouse? Because you should. You should have that kind of communication where you can just tell and just know. But when we start to value, the things that we value, we invest in. We invest our time. We invest our talent. We invest our resources in the things that we value. Now, I said we are the bride of Christ. That implies a relationship. Jesus Christ is invested in you. He values you. So much so that he gave his life. So much so that he's gone to prepare a place for you to dwell with him. He's invested in you. We need to be invested in him. We need to go back to him as our cistern and as our well. As our well, that's the water that's flowing, the rivers of living water flowing through you. It's his word, his spirit coming up fresh. That only happens if you spend time talking to him. Prayer. Hello. It happens because you spend time in his word. Hello. Try this in your marriage relationship. You know, honey, I really need to understand some things better, so I'm going to go talk to this person over here about what I need for you. It doesn't seem like it's going to work real well, right? I need to go talk to you. I need to go talk to God. I need to read his word. I don't even need to, not that there's anything wrong with it, but I don't even need to read books by great Christian authors as much as I just need to read his word. Because the Bible doesn't say that he'll reveal the Christian author's wisdom to you as you read their book. It says that he'll reveal himself to you and he'll give you knowledge and wisdom as you read his word. Well, guess what? You need knowledge and wisdom because you know what? We're kind of dumb. Right? So I need to spend time in his word. I can understand his character and I can start to do those things. And then we get to, well, I don't want to go to prayer because it's boring. I don't want to go to prayer because I don't like that. Well, guess what? When you start going to your own well, when you start going to your own cistern and you start looking there for your satisfaction and there for your contentment, and he starts revealing more of himself to you, guess what? Spending time together is actually good. And you're like, I get to pray. I get to spend time in the Word. I get to spend time with God. The song we used to sing, I love to be in your presence. And I love that. I love to be in your presence. God, I want to be in your presence. Quite honestly, if I came to church and I never got to be in God's presence at church, I wouldn't come anymore. What would be the point? Right? It's good to assemble together. It's good to gather together, and corporate praise is good, and worship is good, and hearing the word as, it comes from one that God has made a shepherd over your life is good. But if none of that led me to feeling God's presence, if none of that led me to being in God's presence, I wouldn't waste my time. Pastor, I don't even know if that's right or wrong. That's my heart, right? I'm just telling, I want to be in God's presence. I want to feel God's presence. It's what? It doesn't work without God. You got to have God there, right? And the cistern side of that storing up, it's when I go and I give praise, and it's when I spend time in His Word, and it's when I spend time in prayer that I build that storehouse, so that maybe when I can't see or feel the flow from the well, I can still go to the cistern and get what I need. Does that make sense? That's where we're supposed to be. Bottom line is this: if you aren't content, if you're not at peace, if you're not happy, go to your own well. Look there. Begin to value what's there. And from a spiritual standpoint, go to God. Let Him know. Communicate what's going on. But begin to value God. And watch how everything changes. When I begin to say, God, I love you. God, I need you. God, you are more beautiful than diamonds. You're more precious than gold. When I begin to do that, my contentment begins to happen. My peace begins to happen. And everything that I need, that I'm longing for, that I'm thirsting for, is quenched when I go to my own well. And that's it for this week.